one in this quiet residential community saw or heard anything unusual on the day a neighbor was brutally attacked. But a store's security camera, a fingerprint, and forensic computer analysis helped to identify a suspect in another state within 12 hours of the crime. In 1997, Escaline DeBoard moved to a residential neighborhood in Knoxville, Tennessee. She lived just a few blocks away from her daughter and grandson.
So as soon as I became pregnant, she moved to Knoxville to be with me. She was very family-oriented. She liked being with her children.
The area was virtually crime-free.
If you were to match up the different sectors of this county, I think most everybody in Knox County would agree with you that it's one of the safest places in our county.
They're all families, lots of children in the neighborhood, nice yards, picket fence, the quintessential American story, very nice.
Escaline worked at home, using her computer to type medical transcriptions for the University of Kentucky. She spent the rest of her free time with her family.
My mother saw my child every day, and they talked on the phone numerous times. She would miss him. She'd have to walk the 2 blocks from her house to my house because she said, I need a grand fix. I've got to be with him.
Late in the afternoon, on August 20th, 2001, Liz realized she hadn't heard from her mother since talking to her that morning.
She always called me around 5:30. If she wasn't at my house, she would always at least call around 5, right before dinner, 5 or 5:30, and I hadn't heard from her. So around 6:30, I began to get concerned.
Calls to Escaline's home went unanswered and weren't picked up by her answering machine.
So I got in my car and drove to her house, and her door was locked, and the blinds were closed. My mother loved lights, so this scent looks different. So I used my key to walk in, and that's when I found her on the floor.
Her mother had been murdered.
Was the door locked when you came in? Yes. Things are just all over the place. And her wallet is out of her purse, and there's credit cards strewn all over the floor. They've gone through things. The phone was unplugged down here. That's why her answering machine didn't pick up. And they've gone through cabinets, and her back window's closed. Mama.
The house had been ransacked, and it appeared as if someone had gone through Escaline's jewelry. The bruises and cuts on her hands and arms were defensive wounds indicating she had fought her attacker. Escaline's wallet was empty, and while some of her credit cards were found on the carpet, most of them were missing.
He took everything out of the wallet, took time to look at every little piece of paper in the wallet, and found the PIN code numbers for the credit cards.
Investigators found no signs of forced entry.
It told us it's a possibility that she knew the person, or that for some reason they surprised her at the front of the house and that the door was opened for whoever this was.
Well, I really didn't know. First impression would be someone that she knew because of no forced entry.
But Escaline's daughter didn't believe it.
She was so reserved, she was very quiet, and again, a very, very easygoing person. I could never imagine anybody knowing her. Anybody she knew would want to hurt her.
In the kitchen, investigators found a soda can, a drinking glass, and a cigarette butt on the floor.
This perpetrator had spent a considerable amount of time in the residents, had taken time to eat some food and drink some cola, and just was in control.
Liz also told detectives her mother's car was missing.
We were able to relay to other agencies throughout the area to be on the lookout for her vehicle, because we only could assume that whoever had murdered Escaline DeBoard also had her vehicle.
Investigators canvassed the whole neighborhood, but no one had heard or seen anything unusual.
In a matter of probably 20 minutes of my arriving on the scene, I had somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 to 65 people working on that crime.
Unfortunately, if it's not solved within a 24-hour after the fact, things can happen very quickly. Evidence can be destroyed. The case is getting cold very quickly.
In time, they would discover an important clue inside Escaline DeBoard's computer. There were no signs of forced entry at Escaline DeBoard's home. But her daughter Liz told police that her mother often left her front door unlocked.
Trying to make it easier for me. If I had something in my hands or I was holding my son, I could just come in and not have to fiddle with keys and thinking about me.
There were plenty of clues in the townhouse.
We found latent prints on 2 glasses. The location of the prints on the glasses led us to believe, or did confirm, that someone had a hold of the top of the glasses carrying those in there.
The prints were entered into the automated fingerprint identification system known as AFIS and compared to millions of prints in a nationwide database. The search did not immediately produce a match.
Sometimes it takes a matter of hours, maybe even days, because you're looking at several million entries.
The biological samples from the rape test kit were sent to the forensics lab for testing. First, the sample was placed into a vial with the stain extraction buffer, which breaks down all non-biological particles and proteins surrounding the DNA. Phenochloroform was then added, allowing the DNA to congeal. And this was analyzed using a polymerase chain reaction test. The result was believed to be the killer's DNA profile. Next, forensic analysts examined Escaline's computer, and with the help of her employer's mainframe computer, found an important clue.
When we looked at Escaline DeBoard's computer, we discovered that she had sent out an email at 12:21, the day that she was found dead. That led us to believe that she was alive and obviously had been working on her computer prior to whoever had entered her home before she had contact with them.
And investigators found evidence that Escaline's computer had automatically logged off 3 minutes after sending that email. That meant the time of her death was sometime after 12:30.
We were trying to get a time frame for the death itself. We were also trying at the same time to learn if there was anything out of the normal in the community.
Neighbors told police there were magazine salesmen going door to door on the afternoon of Escaline's murder.
Many people relayed to us that these people had been in their residence or in their subdivision during the time of 11 in the morning up till almost 4 p.m.
Local ordinances require sales organizations to have permits for each and every salesman selling door to door, but there had been no permits granted to any sales groups that week. Sheriff Tim Hutchison knew that traveling sales groups from out of state usually stay at local motels. Typically, a company van would pick them up at the motel in the morning, take them to a neighborhood to sell door to door, and then take them back to the motel at the end of the day.
We've had problems in the past with some of these people being very pushy, trying to push themselves in on women and getting in arguments or fights. And so that set an alarm bell off the minute that the word came back to us at the scene that there were some magazine salesmen in the neighborhood that afternoon.
Detectives canvassed several local motels but turned up nothing. Back at the crime scene, investigators followed another lead. Escaline's wallet was empty, and her daughter told them it was normally full of credit cards. Detectives thought the intruder may have stolen them and tried to use them.
So we started looking through the drawers trying to find past bills which would have those credit card numbers on them, which companies that they were with. And so by doing that, we found which cards were missing.
Police asked the bank to notify them if anyone tried using one of those stolen cards. They never dreamt that the killer would walk right into their trap. Only a few hours after Escaline DeBoard's murder, officials at her bank told police that someone tried to use one of her credit cards at an ATM at a local gas station.
We retrieved about, I think, $80 or so out of the ATM.
Detectives checked the ATM's surveillance video. They saw a tall, thin man wearing a white shirt and black tie standing at the machine for 8 minutes. Afterwards, he picked up a drink and went to the counter to pay for it. It appeared that he was asking the store clerk for directions.
Whoever used Escaline DeBoard's card was dressed wearing the white shirt and black tie, led us to believe that it was one of the magazine salesmen who in fact had been in her residence. All the neighbors we spoke to said the magazine salesmen that came to the residence were wearing white shirts, black ties.
Detectives questioned the store clerk, and she clearly remembered the customer. He told her he was from New York City and asked for directions to the motel on Paper Mill Road. Police went immediately to the motel, and they spotted 2 vans similar to those used to transport the traveling salesman. Across the street, police also saw Escaline DeBoard's car, which was immediately processed for fingerprints.
When we spoke with the magazine salesmen that were at the Super 8, we discovered that one of the magazine salesmen didn't show up for their pickup point at 4 p.m.
That salesman was 21-year-old Roger Broadway.
When we first spoke with the manager of the magazine salesman, he was reluctant to give us information.
When the sheriff threatened to impound his vans, the supervisor changed his mind.
He started telling us that there was one individual that worked for him that was from New York City that had got word that his relatives were sick, and he immediately needed to leave to go back home.
The manager admitted that they recruited salesmen with criminal records but claimed that they were rehabilitated.
The manager of the magazine salesman told us that many of the people that they hire are from halfway houses in inner cities, just to give them the opportunity to make some money and get out of the city.
Roger Broadway told his employer that he had a family emergency and needed to go back to New York City immediately.
The manager took Roger Broadway to the bus station, purchased him a bus ticket, and sent him on a bus back to New York.
Police knew they needed to catch Broadway before he got off that bus.
If he had made it back to New York, where it was from, it would be really impossible to find him there.
He's on home turf then, and those people, if they know you're after them, they can hide out for long, sometimes long periods of time.
He would have went underground, I'm sure.
A background check revealed that Roger Broadway had served a prison term for aggravated robbery. Detectives checked with the bus company and were told the bus would take Interstate Highway 81 to New York. And they also told police exactly where the bus would be during its journey. Shortly after midnight, police asked sheriff's officers in Virginia to try to intercept that bus. Sheriff's deputies were able to catch up with the bus they believed was carrying Roger Broadway on Interstate 81 in Virginia. When they pulled the bus over and sheriffs walked on board, Roger Broadway surrendered without incident. In his luggage, investigators found bloody clothing, Escaline DeBoard's engagement ring, and her car key.
He held something in his pocket that my mother wore, and it was violating, I guess. The experience I had was a very violating experience, that he would even touch something that was hers, that touched her, I suppose.
Broadway's fingerprints were compared to those on the drinking glass at the crime scene and on Escaline's car window. A computer program identified small shapes within the fingerprints called minutiae, shown here in green squares. Hundreds of these points matched.
Those prints belong to the suspect, Roger Broadway.
Investigators took a blood sample from Broadway for DNA testing. As expected, Broadway's DNA profile matched the biological samples at the crime scene.
The scientist told us that the odds of this being incorrect, the odds were greater than the population of the world.
Based on the forensic evidence, prosecutors believe Broadway entered Escaline DeBoard's unlocked townhouse intending to burglarize it, not knowing she was upstairs. Escaline was working upstairs on her computer, and she sent her last email at 12:21. The computer logged off 3 minutes later. Escaline must have heard someone downstairs and gone to investigate.
What you doing there?
After a scuffle, Broadway killed Escaline, then cut the telephone cords. Before he left, Broadway helped himself to a soda and cigarettes. He took Escaline's credit cards and her car, then drove to the ATM for cash and directions. He never realized the store's security camera, normally used to prevent robbery, in this case, helped solve a murder. Broadway then ditched the car, told his supervisor he needed to leave town, and took the first bus to New York City.
I suspect a number of our more senior citizens that live alone would have been terrified that there was a madman on the loose. So we were very fortunate that we didn't have to live through that and try to calm the fears of a number of our citizens here.
When he saw the amount of forensic evidence, Roger Broadway pled guilty to murder and aggravated robbery. In return, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 50 years.
Roger Broadway showed no remorse for what he had done. And to me, I think he received the best penalty that was available to him. And I hope he has the rest of his life to think about that.
Liz Nofsinger wears her mother's engagement ring to keep the memory of her always with her.
I love you. And I miss you. That's about the only thing I can say to my mom right now. Or I wish you were here.
But she says she will not allow a killer to ruin what remains of her family.
I don't want my son to remember his grandmother that way, and I don't want to remember my mother that way. I want to remember her how she lived. I don't want to remember her how she died.
Officials in Tennessee have introduced legislation to regulate companies who use convicted felons as door-to-door salesmen.
No one here knew that this convicted violent felon was in our neighborhood selling and working. And so we would like to see a law on the books where the people must register with local law enforcement if they have a criminal record.
I would like to feel as though I had something to do with changing the industry and making it safer. So if someone does knock on your door, they are licensed and bonded and they have identification with their picture on it.
Even if those laws were to be passed, detectives warn people to be extremely careful when dealing with door-to-door salesmen.
You don't know their backgrounds, you don't know what they're capable of, you really don't know what their intentions are once they get into your home. So I would strongly advise not allowing people into your residence that you don't know.
Lock your doors. I don't care where you live, how safe it is. This is a safe community where murders never occur, but it did here.
Forensic computer analysis, DNA testing, fingerprint analysis, and the store's security camera all work together to solve a case within 12 hours of the crime.
The collection of that evidence, the way it was collected here, the way it was preserved, maintained, is a textbook example of how any investigation, and particularly a homicide investigation, should be run.
Thank goodness that we do, that we have the technology and the tools to be able to do that. So it's essential that the forensics, the science, is a part of the process.